Hey all, and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to be going over even more cheap wargames. After my last video, I have gotten countless comments of even more cheap wargames. And while I'm a little sad Legion isn't technically the cheapest wargame I have played anymore, there are many on this list that seem very fun and many I am probably going to be buying and making videos about in the next 6 months. Hopefully you find a new favorite on this list as well. Going over the rules for what I consider a wargame in this context, I will not be unfair and go with the most expensive armies or the cheapest. Bundles will be taken into account, especially ones geared towards starter players. If a website says start here, we start here. We are going off of the recommended game size from the game itself. And skirmish wargames are excluded and will have their own video. I got a ton of comments in the last video about why I was excluding skirmish wargames, and my mentality on it is very simple. If I am playing something like Bolt Action, or Old World, or Age of Sigmar, I am expecting a very different experience than if I would play something like Kill Team, or Warcry, or Cyberpunk Combat Zone, or Classic Battletech. I am expecting two very different experiences there, which is why I am considering them separate, and they will have their own video coming out most likely next Saturday, probably in 2 parts because there are just so many skirmish wargames that got recommended to me. Also, these will once again be ranked from most expensive to cheapest. However, everything on this list is under $200, so that's a big plus compared to the last list. Next up is Hail Caesar, another Warlord Games game. Hail Caesar is a 28mm scale historical wargame. Similar to Bolt Action, it has starter sets for around 140 USD, and while I have not played it, I absolutely will be at some point in the future. With all the scale changes on this list, it is also going to be mentioned wherever necessary, as many of these are very small scale wargames. The 140 USD starter set includes everything you do need to play the game, including a simplified rulebook. However, the rulebook itself is about 45 USD from what I could tell. Also, one of the appeals of Hail Caesar, it is a larger scale historical wargame. Most historical wargames are not in the 28mm scale. Number 8 is going to be A Song of Ice and Fire. It is a Game of Thrones based wargame and is 28mm scale. As someone who knows absolutely nothing about Game of Thrones, this game has kind of intrigued me. Starting at pretty much $110. The starter sets have enough for a small battle, which will get you started, and for another 30 USD you can get to 40 points, which is their medium battle and pretty much the recommended size. This is a very intriguing thing to me. I have zero interest in Game of Thrones as a setting, but it's a free rulebook. The rulebook looks very interesting, and it's a nice, simple rank and flank game that actually looks like it has a lot of depth. Obviously, this is not high on my list because I don't know much about Game of Thrones. It's a setting that's never really intrigued me too much. But it's really nice to have this on my radar, and I'm definitely not opposed to covering it in the future. Number 7 is one of the many things I've only just discovered, and that is Argatoria. Argatoria is a 10mm scale rule set. The rulebook is under 20 USD, and digital it's just like 3 USD, and an entire army is around 125 USD, but a starter army is just 62. It is a very unique system in that it is a roll low system, not a roll high, but it's also German, so, that makes sense. So if someone has a weapon skill of 2, a 1 or a 2 hits, everything else misses. And I think that is pretty neat and fun. Spellcrow has a brochure. I highly recommend reading through it. It pretty much has sold me on it completely, Spellcrow being the company that makes Argatoria, of course. I'm probably saying Argatoria wrong, but it appears to be just a very vibrant, very fun wargame, and the amount of self-control I have to have as a human being to not immediately buy everything on this list is probably going to make my wallet hurt later down the road. Next up is Flames of War. It is a 15mm scale wargame. Flames of War is a really fun wargame that is rather cheap to get into. You're looking at about 110 USD for one army, and if you find someone to split starter sets with you, it can get even lower. The starter sets are just 60 USD and come with a simple rulebook and pretty much everything you need to play. Flames of War is a game I have bought into myself, and while I haven't played it yet, I've only built them. A 15mm war game for World War II just sounded a lot of fun, which is the entire reason I got it. Going into number 5, we have one of the many new things that I will hopefully be buying before the end of the year. Sorry for sounding like a broken record, but we have Dropfleet. Dropfleet is a sci-fi space combat game. Think Star Wars Armada and Battlefleet Gothic Armada. This game also plays uniquely. You're trying to drop troops on the ground over the cities you are fighting over. This isn't an I blow up the enemy fleet, this is a we are fighting over the cities on this planet. For the scale, the miniature quality is sublime. I looked at multiple painted versions of this, and I just love the designs and how easy and well they are to paint up. There are a ton of YouTube resources on it as well. Depending on your currency conversions, you're looking at about 70 USD for the starter set, which includes 2 fleets that have enough to play, the rulebook, and all the tokens and a mat you would need. 110 USD would be what would be needed to get a battle fleet, which includes most of what you would need to play the game for a while, in my opinion, or 50 USD on a starter fleet to just get you to the recommended 1,000 points if you split a starter set. Heading into number 4 is the most commented thing on my last video and a big miss on my part, one-page rules. I did not realize one-page rules had actual physical minis you can buy, and one of the rules I have is no 3D printing really acknowledged, because, 3D printing is a very expensive in its own hobby, and this is more just for people who want to get into cheaper wargames. However, it has physical minis you can buy, which I did not know. One-page rules is amazing in that it gives you an option to play an arguably better version of Warhammer 40,000. I have not tried their Age of Sigmar/Fantasy replacements, so I can't comment on those. But I very much prefer alternating activations, and that alone makes me like one-page rules. For 100 USD, you get a starter army with one-page rules, which should be enough to play for a while and get you into the game heavily. And it can also supplement already existing collections, as it is a very miniatures-agnostic game. You can pretty much put any minis you have or cardboard cutouts for these one-page rules, which, by the way, are free, so, go for it. You should be having no problem at all to find what you need to play this game. Next up is number 3, Middle-earth Strategy Battle Game. Made by Games Workshop, it is actually surprisingly cheap for a Games Workshop game to get into. The appeal is also very straightforward, a well-balanced, decades-long supported game that mixes hero and unit combat very well. I have played a demo game of this, I absolutely loved the system, but it's got a weird appeal level to it where, I don't know, it never really picked up locally for me, but I still have the army and can play it at any time. It is only 90 USD to start, as they have battle host rules that get you an army to play right out of the box, and the rules for that battle host were at one point free, so they should still be. The rulebook is also easily available online, but if you were to buy it, it is another 50 USD. At least from looking online from what I could find. I did not look at Amazon, because I feel like Amazon is cheating. There are still many people who love this game, and there are still many scenes for it, and I highly recommend trying it if you have an opportunity to. Especially if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, because it's still there, it still exists, and it's a really fun way to be a Lord of the Rings fan. Number 2 is DBA, or, excuse my horrible butchering of this because it is going to sound terrible, Bellis Antiquitatis. DBA is a historical wargame in the 15mm scale. It is made to be played in an hour and always have an outright victor. It costs about $75 from what I can tell to get a full army, but it is kind of hard to find solid information without buying the book, which is only $20 US. You can find other cheaper options as the system is miniature agnostic, so I'm sure it can cost less than 75 USD. That is just the cheapest 15mm scale I could find in my search for this video. Now, I'm going to highlight something else about Bellis Antiquitatis, or DBA. It is that it is meant to be played fast, simple, and fun. The person who designed it had the mindset that you could play 6 games in a day and still have time to go visit the trade tables at a convention. I love this mindset as far as miniature war games go. It's enough to sell me. If I am ever going to do a 15mm scale game, I am probably going to be doing Bellis Antiquitatis first, because convincing my friends to play an hour-long game is always easier than going, this will probably take us 3 to 4 hours. Next up, we have an honorable mention, Saga. Saga is on the borderline of traditional wargame and a skirmish wargame, and is more of an honorable mention as I don't believe it fits in the skirmish wargame video, but also it identifies as a skirmish wargame. It is a miniatures agnostic setting, so the rulebook is just 20 USD. Victrix sells a box of 60 Vikings for 46 USD, and your size of your army is 30 to 60 minis, so 1 to 2 boxes of Vikings and you have 2 sides. Or you could also go for, the Saxons, etc. But Victrix seems to be one of the cheaper places to go. So for 66 USD, you have a solid army and the rules. I could not find a starter box as, again, miniature agnostic, and there are many faction options as well. Saga is intriguing, and the rulebook is necessary along with many of the things it comes with, as there are systems that pretty much exist with the rulebook. It's weird to explain. I like the idea of Saga, and I might end up playing it. But like I said, it's on the borderline of what I would consider a traditional war game and what I would consider a skirmish war game. So it gets an honorable mention here where its price point is. So technically, if it was a traditional, it would be number 2. But if it was a skirmish war game, it would be like number 1 or 2 as well. It's just a really cheap game. The most expensive thing you're doing is getting a box of 60 Viking minis from Victrix. And the number 1 of the even more cheap war games is Dropzone. And Dropzone pulled me in by just the miniatures alone and is very high on my list to try. It is a sci-fi mass battle game by TT Combat and looks fantastic. It's beautiful and amazing. For the scale, because again, this is a 10mm scale, the miniature quality is sublime and I love the design of the minis. It gives me Supreme Commander vibes, which I am all for. And, depending on your currency conversions, you're looking at 50 USD to start, and a starter army is another 35 USD, which gets you to the recommended point cost. So, for each individual person playing this game, if you split the starter box and then get a starter army, you are spending $60 for a full-size game. Also, if you want their terrain, if I am looking at their website correctly, it is $35 for an entire table full of terrain. That is amazing. That is ridiculously cheap. Like, this game is so cheap. It is so cool. It gives me such Supreme Commander vibes, and like, I love this. I have fallen in love with this game. The more I look at it, the more I look at how it's played. It's very transport heavy. Like, it is so cool. The idea behind it is so cool. It does look like a lot of people say that the game is not as good as it looks on paper. And honestly, that is to be expected with a game. It's never as good as it looks, but for the price, for spending $60 to play a game that's not as good as it looks on paper, I'm pretty much all down for that without any complaints. And now we're in our wrap-up for the video. Hopefully you found a new war game to have fun with. I know that the Dropzone, Dropfleet games will be on my shortlist. And next up is Skirmish War Games, probably in 2 parts. Thanks to everyone who watched the first video and this video. It's been great to see my channel getting so many more views, especially with videos I enjoy and love making. After the Skirmish War Games are done, I'm really tempted to make a video just on Games Workshop prices and why their systems are so expensive. I don't know. I feel like that'll keep getting pushed back as I start making videos on other war games I cover here. I am still planning a Cyberpunk Combat Zone video, and I'm still trying to figure out how exactly to make a let's play this, or I should say let's learn to play this system video series work, but you know, we'll make it work. Have a wonderful weekend all, and I'll see you all next week.